Ladies of Concord Church, how are you? I am so excited to be back with you. It's been about, I think, 18 months or something since I was here last, so it's so good to get to be with you again. I love your First Lady. I love her. You guys are so blessed, not just by Lady Stephanie, but also Pastor Brian, people who have had faithful service here for over 15 years, who have had incredible leadership. What you guys have is special. I hope you don't take that for granted. I hope you know how amazing your leaders are. They are incredible. I'm so glad to be here. I am from Las Vegas. I heard an ooh out there when that was announced, but don't be afraid. I'm a Texas girl. I was born and raised in Amarillo, Texas, and then God picked us up and dropped us on the mission field in Las Vegas. And we've been there for almost 17 years, which is crazy. So of course, my favorite thing to do when I hit Texas is I got to get to Papacitas as fast as I can, because they have terrible Tex-Mex in Las Vegas. So I am so glad to be back in Texas and back here in Dallas with you. I want to introduce you to my family. I have a picture of my family coming up here on the screen, maybe. There they are. That is my husband, Judd. We have been married for over 23 years. Thank you, choir. I didn't know y'all were still back there. Good to see you. He's awesome. He's obviously pastors our church in Vegas. That little girl there is my freshman in college, Emma. She is studying to be a worship pastor, so I will be sending her video of what just went down on this stage, because she will love that. She is our little songbird, sings all the time, and just a joy. And then that 6'4", very handsome 16-year-old boy is my son, Ethan, who, that's right, already 6'4", which is, I told him one day, I said, do not think I can't tackle you still. And he said, can you? And he picked me up and ran around the house, and I thought, oh no, it's over. He has a sharp wit and a really soft heart. So that's my little family from Vegas. And I am so excited that you guys are going to be jumping in starting this week to my new book, Rise Up, Lessons from Ezra on Walking with Your Heads Held High. I'm going to give you the 50-cent version of what you're going to be going through. When you open up your Bible to the book of Ezra, you meet a guy named, wait for it, Ezra. And Ezra was this guy who was called by God to teach his people God's ways, to give them direction in their lives so that they would know how to obey the word of God. And part of that was that he would need to leave his place in exile and go back to Jerusalem to do that. And as he did, the Bible says 6 different times the hand of the Lord was on Ezra. The gracious hand of the Lord. Isn't that beautiful? And then we read the first 2 words of Ezra chapter 9. But then. Have you ever had a but then moment in your life? Everything was going great. The gracious hand of God was on you. Everything was amazing. But then. But then Ezra finds himself completely laid out, destroyed and distraught by the sins of other people, by the mistakes people have made, and he is devastated. Have you been there? Have you been at a place where you are on your face before God and you don't have anything left and you're filled with disappointment and discouragement and depression? That is Ezra. And then in Ezra 10:4, a guy named Shechaniah walks up to Ezra and he says, Ezra, rise up, take courage, and go do it. Go do what God has called you to do. So Ezra rose up. And that's what you guys are going to be studying over the next few weeks in your study. I think it's going to be a fun journey to do together. But today we're going to talk about, how do you rise up? How do you take courage? And then when you do, how do you do what God has called you to do? Today, we're going to talk about walking with our heads held high. Years ago, I was on a little girls' trip in sunny Southern California, and we were driving the back roads. We ran across this field full of longhorns. Now, I'm a Texas girl, remember. I have seen cattle, lots and lots of cattle. Again, Amarillo. I grew up within smelling distance of the feedlots. And so I had seen a lot of cows, but I had never seen longhorn like these. As they walked along, they drug their horns through the dirt of the field. And I thought, my gosh, these are like sick animals. What's going on? I grabbed a local guy and I said, what is wrong with these longhorn? And he said, nothing is wrong with them. Their horns have become so heavy, they can no longer walk with their heads high. And as soon as he said it, I thought, I have walked with that posture too. I have walked dragging my horns through the dirt. I have walked in disappointment, in discouragement, with hurt and heartbreak, so much weighing me down that my horns are dragging through the dirt too, and I bet you have as well. Why is it so hard? Why do we continue to walk with our heads down, staring at the ground, carrying the burden of insecurity, oppressed by hurt and trauma, weighed down by disappointment and bitterness? We're going to meet a woman in Luke 13, a woman who is walking with more than just her head low. We're going to pull it up on the screens. It says in Luke 13, starting in verse 10, it says, one Sabbath day, as Jesus was teaching in a synagogue, he saw a woman who had been crippled by an evil spirit. She had been bent double. She had been what? Bent. She had been bent double for 18 years and was unable to stand up straight. This woman, we do not know her name. She is only identified by the woman who was bent. Some of you are walking in your lives, and what you are known by is walking bent. Bent by discouragement, bent by hurt, bent by heartbreak. That was this woman. We don't have a name, only that she was bent. For 18 years, she suffered. For 18 years, she lived in pain. For 18 years, she walked bent. That is 216 months, 6,570 days that she was bent. And not just bent double. When she walked, she could see nothing more than the dirt in front of her. She could not watch her children play. She could not embrace her family. She could not make eye contact with her friends. She was bent. Luke describes her as a woman crippled by an evil spirit. Jesus says that she had been held in bondage by Satan for 18 years. She was a hostage spiritually before she was a hostage physically. She didn't just have a physical problem, she had a spiritual problem. She was experiencing the physical manifestation of her spiritual situation. And isn't it true that we can be bound by the same thing now? We may not have the physical manifestation, but we have the emotional manifestation of our spiritual situation, and we find ourselves bent. What do we do then? We don't just have a confidence problem, we have a spiritual problem. And when you face criticism that draws out your deepest insecurities, you become bent. Or your decisions are called into questions and your fears rise up and you're bent. Your marriage is struggling, you're not connecting, you're not communicating, and you're bent. And your kids, maybe they're making decisions that are breaking your heart, or maybe they're just starting to crumble under the pressure of school and friends and athletics and all the things they have going on in their lives. And moms in the room, is it not true that we are only as happy as our saddest child? And you're bent. Maybe your finances are a mess right now and you don't know how you're going to pay the bills this month, and you're terrified and you are bent. What do we do when we're bent? What do we do when we're weighed down by all that life throws at us? How do we walk with our heads held high? First, we need to be unbent from doubt. Unbent from doubt. I am a well-documented faller. Last time I was here, I kind of ran through the laundry list of my injuries. I'm just going to remind you again, just a small few of them. I fractured my right foot after I heard Dr. Tara Jenkins preach a message in toe shoes. And I thought, I too can be a ballerina. And so I walked to her on my toes, in my sneakers, and fractured my foot. I fractured my left foot while I was running backstage at our church trying to get out for our baby dedication and tripped on a bunch of cords backstage. I broke my left ankle falling down a hill on a mission trip in Mexico. I fractured my right kneecap when I thought I was a better snow skier than I actually am. I chipped my wrist and broke my arm when I fell off our stage at church. Yeah, thank you, choir. Thank you. It was that bad. Let's see, I tore my shoulder when I was training for a 5K because don't you have a shoulder injury when you're running? And I earned myself a summer in a neck brace by not doing a good backflip on a trampoline. So I am a hot mess from head to literally my toes. I fall all the time. So it should not be surprising that on a dinner out with some friends, I had one of my falling incidents. We were standing outside waiting to get in the restaurant, and in Vegas, we do not have a lot of bugs in Vegas. I know you guys have some mosquitoes and stuff like that. Any insect that can actually survive our climate is a monster, okay? So most don't survive there, most don't live there, but when they do, they're like monstrosities. So we were standing and talking, and this huge, ginormous insect flew right by my face and landed on the shoulder of our friend. My husband kind of shooed it away with his hand, and when he did, it left like a insect secretion, on our friend's jacket, like an excrement, if you will. And being a good friend, I stepped over and wiped it off with my bare hand because I didn't want his jacket to get ruined. And when I stepped back, my ankle twisted and I was down on my backside like that. And I was a little embarrassed, so I hopped up and I was like, I'm fine, I'm totally fine. And I mostly thought I was. And the next day I thought, I am going to be covered in bruises. So I'm kind of checking myself out in the mirror. And I told my husband, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to be so bruised and sore today. I must not have fallen very hard. And he goes, oh no, babe, I saw your thighs jiggle. Did you now? Did you? Because now we're going to fight. And so, but that is how self-doubt works in our lives. Out of nowhere, some words that are hurtful fly by us. They come out of nowhere. Or we get a bad review at work, or something's going on in our families, and we find ourselves on our backsides, surrounded by self-doubt. That's how it works. Sometimes I have felt like I was just not good enough. Not good enough in my leadership, not good enough in my parenting, not good enough in my marriage. And that pile keeps growing. Maybe I've thought, I just don't have what it takes. I'm not talented enough. I'm not gifted enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not together enough. I'm not young enough. I'm not old enough. I'm not equipped enough. And our self-doubt grows, and it grows, and it grows. And our confidence becomes more and more corrupted. And we just become numb. We become numb to how that self-doubt has infected our lives. We don't even recognize anymore that we're no longer walking with our heads held high. And one of the main ways self-doubt creeps into our lives is comparison. Have you ever struggled with comparison? Looking around at the other women in your lives, your family, your friends, your coworkers, and you think, they have it all together, but my life is messed up. They seem so successful that I feel like a failure. Everything is going great in their lives, but everything seems like a complete mess in mine. And I can see God's hand on their lives, but what's going on in mine? And that comparison steals our joy and robs us of our contentment. That's what comparison does. It steals us of our joy and it robs us of contentment. Because we compare all of our weaknesses and failures to everyone else's victories and successes. The mess ups of our lives to the highlight reel of theirs. And we get weighed down, and we get weighed down, we get weighed down, and we're bent. Have you ever felt like that? So much self-doubt surrounding you. Well, here's what happened with the bent woman. When we turn back to the book of Luke and we look at verse 11, it says, when Jesus saw her. When he what? When he saw her, he called her over. When Jesus saw her, he called her over. There were so many people that Jesus healed that he did not have to see. There was the woman who laid herself out on the ground trying to reach for the hem of his robe. And when she was healed, Jesus had to ask, who touched him? He did not even know. He raised Lazarus from the dead who was buried in a tomb. But he saw this woman because I think she needed to be seen. She had been seen as the woman who was bent for so long. She had no other identity. But Jesus did not see her present. He saw her potential. And I want you to know that Jesus doesn't just see your present. He sees your potential as well. The Lord sees you. And this is what Jesus sees. He says you are chosen. You are qualified. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. He has equipped, gifted, and purposed you for great things. You are accepted. He is preparing within you what he has prepared for you. You are forgiven. You are an overcomer. You are saved by his mercy. You are never alone. You are unconditionally loved and eternally bound to God. You have what it takes, and you are more than enough. You are redeemed. Your former shame has no power in your present. You are wonderful, you are strong, and God has armed you with power to get through the obstacles you face. That is how God sees you. So women of Concord Church, shoulders back, chin up. It's time we walk with our heads held high. Here's the second thing. We've got to get unbent from disappointment. Unbent from disappointment. Life is filled with disappointment, isn't it? Because sometimes disappointing things happen, or people do disappointing things. A while ago, I was with my daughter, and we decided to go with my parents. My mom's here today. Hi, Mom. To go see a show down on the Las Vegas Strip. And so we live in this city where we have so much available to us. So we decided we were going to go see a concert, and we were going to meet my parents at the Strip. Now, it had been one of those days, ladies, where I had been in my workout clothes all day. I mean, I hadn't worked out. But half of the battle is putting the clothes on, and I had been very comfortable and cute that day. And so I just went to get ready, and I just wasn't in it. Like, I just didn't want to get fancy. And so I thought, you know what I'm going to do is get my cutest leggings, and I'll put my cutest leggings on with still a big shirt, and I'll throw on some heels, and it'll be fine. And so I checked myself out in the mirror, and I thought, like, you know, it's been worse, but, I'm just going. I'm going anyway. So I grabbed my daughter, and we got in the car, and we went to the Strip. Now, I have been in Vegas 17 years. I have driven the Strip a million times. I know all the back roads. I know all the way around it. I know how to avoid all the traffic. But this day, I don't know, maybe it's just because I've been so lazy that day, like my brain was on checkout mode, and I pulled into the wrong hotel. And I thought, it's just, I just meant to go to the one next door. Now, how many of you have been to Vegas? Okay, so then you know that the hotel next door is like 3 miles away. And so I was like, it's fine, Emma. We're going to have to just pretend we're back in junior high, and we got to set the record for the fastest mile run. Here we go. So we hustled all the way through the Palazzo. We ran past those little gondolier guys and zoomed all the way through the shops. And then we huffed and puffed our way through the Venetian to finally get to the restaurant to meet my parents. And we had done really well. I was very impressed with us. We made it. I needed a ton of water, but we had done it. And we sat and had a great dinner with my parents. And toward the end of the night, I reached down to scratch my leg. And I thought, what in the world? I felt like this bump on the back of my leg. And so I tried to, as discreetly as possible, slip my hand up inside my leggings and see what was going on. And I pulled out my underwear. Don't be scandalized. It's like a regular Tuesday in Vegas. It's really not that big of a deal. So I was like, oh my goodness, and my dad's across the table, and so I just kind of put it in my handbag. But you guys, I had hustled all the way through the palazzo with a lump of laundry on the back of my legs. I had run past the gondolier guys and zoomed through the shops with a wad of undies on the back of my leg. I had huffed and puffed through the Venetian with a protrusion of panties on my leg. I was so embarrassed. And disappointment can be like that sometimes. We stand and we look at ourselves in the mirror and we think, I look pretty good. And little do we know that hiding are lumps of disappointment, bits of hurt that are not very easily removed and discreetly put in our handbags. That's how disappointment gets in our lives. So how can we keep them from making us bent? The bent woman had a problem of health, but she also had a problem of habit. You see, the spinal condition that she had, it couldn't get better just by having better posture or by just standing up straight. In fact, that would have been excruciatingly painful. The way she could relieve her pain was to sink down further still. And while that might have given her temporary relief, it did long-term damage. And when disappointment comes in our lives, we can be tempted to do the same thing because sometimes it hurts to stand up straight. Sometimes it hurts to let God come along and help us stand up. So instead, we just sink in further still. Sink into our disappointment, sink into our hurt, sink into our heartbreak. I had a lady email me this summer, and she had been at my conference the year before, and we had had a great conference. It had just been awesome, and she was writing to tell me how absolutely furious she was at me. And so upset that she had left our conference, so upset. You see, she had an opportunity, I think, that God hand-delivered her, wrapped it up in a beautiful bow and stuck it in her hands, an opportunity to forgive some people who had hurt her in her life, who had incredibly disappointed her. And instead of forgiving them, she chose to sink in further still. And the truth is, she was right and they were wrong. And they would never apologize and they would never acknowledge what they had done. But instead of walking in forgiveness, she wrote to tell me that they had left their career in ministry, they had left their church, and she was sinking in to her disappointment. And it might have given her temporary relief, but it was doing long-term damage to her, to their marriage, to their family, to their church. That's what happens when we sink in further. Sometimes we get so used to being bent. We've been bent so long that we cannot even remember how to stand up straight. So what does that bent woman do? You look back at Luke 13, and I love this in verse 12. It says, when Jesus saw her, he called her over and he said, "Dear woman, you are healed of your sickness." Jesus saw her, he called her over. Jesus, hey Jesus, the guy who can stand up straight, the guy who could easily walk over to her, decides to call her over to him. He could have easily walked to where she was. He didn't even need to do that. He could have healed her long distance. But instead, he calls her over to him. Why? I think maybe he knew she needed to take one step. One step that said, Jesus, even though this hurts, I'm willing to come to you. One step that says, hey, Jesus, this is painful, but I am willing to trust you. One step that says, I am coming in your direction. It's taking every amount of energy I've got, but I am with you, Jesus. She needed a change of location physically, but she needed a change of location in her hearts, and so do we. Ladies, shoulders back, chin up. It's time we walk with our heads held high. Third, we want to be unbent from discouragement. We want to be unbent from discouragement. The enemy doesn't want to just put you in bondage. He wants to keep you there. He didn't have her in bondage for 18 minutes, not for 18 days, not for even 18 months. He had her in bondage for 18 years. The tactics of the enemy aren't just to put you in bondage, they are to keep you there. He wants to prohibit you from rising up. He wants to keep you from taking courage, and I promise you, he wants to keep you and stop you from going to do everything God has called you to do in your life. And his best way to do that is to put you in bondage for years. And discouragement is one of his most powerful tools to do that. A few months before my daughter graduated from high school, I was writing this book. And I was writing about discouragement and discouraging times and heartbreaking times. And I decided to write about what I thought it was going to be like to take her to college. Stephanie, I hope you have a Kleenex, my friend, because this is you next. Are you ready? I'm going to read this to you. We opened the wooden blinds on her window to let the sunlight stream in to wake up Emma. Taking a deep breath, we launched into a rousing rendition of an old Broadway classic. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. And everything was going her way because it was Emma's first day of kindergarten. And as she sat and had her breakfast and combed her hair and brushed her teeth, she could hardly hold in her excitement. She put on her little uniform, a white t-shirt with puff sleeves, a khaki skirt, and her princess light-up tennis shoes. And we buckled her in her booster seat and headed for her new school. Standing on that kindergarten playground, I looked around at the rest of the parents, and I wanted to see how my emotions were holding up comparatively. Some parents looked relieved and smiled, so glad to get rid of their little darlings for a few hours. Other moms had tears streaming down their faces at the prospect of having to share a portion of their child's day with some stranger they didn't know. And I felt like I was doing pretty good. I stood watching Emma meet new friends while running around the jungle gym, eyes dry, emotion strong, heart whole. What was wrong with those weirdo moms? And then at the sound of a whistle, the kindergarten teacher called the kids to line up to enter the classroom to start their first day. My toddler on my hip, I squeezed my husband's hand, and we watched Emma following the line toward the school building. And at the last moment, the teacher said, "Kids, turn around and say goodbye to your parents." And what felt like a slow motion scene in a movie, Emma turned around, smiled, and she blew us a kiss, and the floodgates opened. The waterworks began, and I completely lost it because my baby was in kindergarten. And then we blinked. And now we're staring down the moment where we take our little girl to her first day of college. And as we feed her breakfast, and she'll comb her hair and brush her teeth, while hardly being able to contain her nervousness and her excitement, she'll throw on a concert t-shirt and her ripped skinny jeans and some sneakers. She'll buckle herself into her seat in the car, surrounded by everything she'll need to outfit her dorm room. And we'll take off on the 5.5-hour road trip to get to her new school in a new state. And standing on the campus with the rest of those parents, I imagine I'll look around to see how my emotions are holding up comparatively. Some parents will be smiling, both proud of their child's accomplishments and excited to have a little more quiet around their house. Other moms will have tears streaming down their faces at the prospect of having to share their children with so many strangers, and the realization that Thanksgiving break is just months away. And me, I will not be doing great. My husband is going to have to peel me off of the floor where I will be laying with my arms locked around her ankles. Eyes smudged with running mascara, emotions swirling, heartbroken. And she will walk us to our car, and we will do our signature smooch, a kiss on each cheek, Hollywood style, and an Eskimo kiss. And we will watch her walk back to the dorm, and in what will feel like a slow motion scene in a movie, she will turn around and blow us a kiss, because she still always does. And Judd and I will be faced with a very long, very silent drive back to Vegas with our broken hearts, not because we aren't proud of her or excited for her future, but because the hole that girl leaves in our home is unfillable. And that's what I thought it was going to be like when we took her to school. Probably June or July before her senior year, Emma didn't know what she wanted to do. I knew what she should do. I wanted her to stay in Vegas. I wanted her to stay with us. I wanted her to continue to go to our church. I wanted her to be with us. So I was like, here's what we're going to do, honey. We're going to set an alarm on both of our phones, and at 1:25, because your birthday is January 25th, at 1:25 every single day, we're going to pray for God's direction. We're going to pray for his discernment. We're going to pray that he leads you in the right way. And I was going to pray that he would change her mind. And I was convinced that God would tell her she was wrong and she needed to stay home. And so we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. And someone's heart changed. It wasn't hers. It was mine. God made it very clear that he had something new for her, a new adventure where he could teach her and grow her. And she serves at a beautiful church where she's at. He had new opportunity, and it was great. And so I just started that grieving process of when you take your kids off, of what am I going to do? But what I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt is that God was working. And if he was working, we would worship him, even in the midst of our heartbreak. And then when we took her to school and we dropped her off on campus that day, we had dropped her name in the roommate pool. And you guys know there are about 1,000 different ways that can go wrong. And I was terrified. We got notified about a month before school that her new roommate was Haley from San Jose, California. Didn't know Haley, didn't know Haley's family, never been to San Jose. And so we were a little anxious, but we just kept praying and we kept praying. And when we showed up to move Emma into the dorm, we were walking down the hallways and we were like carrying tons of school supplies. And I saw a mom walk out of their room. I said, Emma, honey, I bet that is Haley's mom. And as we got closer, she looked at me and she gasped. And she said, oh my gosh, I recognize you. I just finished your My Name is Victoria study at my church. Come on, Jesus. I was like, are you kidding? And so here we are, two moms, God having to pry our fingers off of our little girls, bonded by our love for him, our love for the church, and by the fact that we would worship him even in the midst of our heartbreak. I brought a picture of Emma and Haley that they shot 2 days after they met. Those girls, they are not just BFFs. Those girls are sisters. They are together all the time. And that Haley, we call her our second daughter, our surrogate daughter. She calls us our second mom and dad. And that girl is the answer to months and months and months of prayer. Because God was working. Even when it didn't feel like it, even when it hurt, even when it was disappointing, even when it was heartbreaking, God was moving. And I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know what heartbreaks you have. I don't know what disappointments you face. But what I do know is that God is moving in the midst of it. He has not left you alone in your pain. He's not abandoned you to your hurt. He's not left you alone with your disappointment. He's working in the midst of it. The question is, will we worship him in the midst? Let's look again at that bent woman. The Bible says in verse 13, it says, then he touched her, and instantly she could stand straight. How she praised God. How she praised God. That is beautiful. But of course she praised him once she was healed. Of course you praise him once you're through your breakthrough. But do not miss this. Do not forget where Jesus found her at the beginning. Jesus found her at the synagogue. He found her at church, y'all. He found her when she was still bent, 18 years in pain, at church to worship God anyway. Before her breakthrough, before her disappointment was gone, she worshiped him in the midst. Women of Concord Church, shoulders back, chin up. It's time to walk with our heads held high. We were not meant to walk with our heads bent low. In fact, one of my favorite verses, Leviticus 26:13 says, I am the Lord your God. I broke the yoke of slavery from your neck so you can walk with your what? Heads held high. So you can walk with your heads held high. God rescued us from slavery to our sin, released us from captivity to our pain, and redeemed us from death. So are we going to walk with our heads held high, or are we going to let us remain bent? He didn't free us from our sin, from our past, from our pain, so that we could continue to be bent by that same sin and past and pain. Galatians 5:1 declares, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then. Say that with me. Stand firm then. And do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. This is what the Message translation says. Christ has set us free to live a free life, so take your stand. Never again let anyone put a harness of slavery on you. You are not meant to be under that burden any longer. You're not meant to live your life with your head to the ground. You're not meant to drag your horns through the dirt because of all the pressures and things that weigh on you. We're meant to walk with our heads held high. So here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to call out a few of the things that make us feel bent. And when you hear something that resonates with you, I just want you to stand up. We just heard in Galatians, it says, take your stand. This is our moment. Okay? When you hear something you think, yes, that is me, I just want you to stand right where you are. If you're done being bent by self-doubt and insecurity, stand up. If you no longer want to be held down by disappointment and discouragement, stand up. If you don't want to let fear, anxiety, and worry weigh you down, stand up. If you don't want to be bound by feeling like you're in somebody else's shadow, stand up. It's time to walk with our heads held high. If you're tired of second-guessing your calling, stand up. If you're ready to be unbent from worrying about what other people think of you, then stand up. If you no longer want to be held down by not feeling good enough, stand up. Ladies, shoulders back, chin up. It's time we walk with our heads held high. Let me pray for you. Jesus, we love you so much. God, we are so thankful that you see us. We don't always feel seen. Sometimes we feel overlooked. Thank you for seeing us. Help us to see ourselves the way you see us. Jesus, thank you for calling us over to you. Please help us have the courage to just take a step, even when it hurts, even when it's painful, even when it's hard. Help us to take a step closer to you. And Jesus, help us to worship you, even in the midst of our heartbreak, even in the midst of our disappointment, our discouragement, our depression. God, help us to worship you. We know we're not meant to walk through this life bent. God, help us to stand up. Help us to rise up. Help us to take courage, and God, help us do what you have called us to do. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.